A billionaire's daughter suddenly runs away from home and falls into drug addiction. While her father desperately searches for the boyfriend who dragged his daughter down this path, the boyfriend is unexpectedly and brutally murdered. He then becomes the prime suspect. However, the more he investigates, the more he uncovers a series of mysterious murders and a horrifying secret involving adopted children and a dark cult. Paige, a wealthy girl, is deceived by a blonde man and falls into drug addiction. Her wandering life causes her father immense grief. He doesn't hesitate to confront both the criminal gang and the police. Simon is a wealthy man with a beautiful wife and 3 children. Their life was originally peaceful and happy. The tragedy occurs when his eldest daughter, Paige, a college student, suddenly runs away from home, bringing the family to the brink of collapse. Simon couldn't understand why Paige, who was so gentle, simple, and kind, could be deceived by a blonde man. He devoted all his efforts to finding information about his daughter. One day, he received news that his daughter had been spotted in a park, but when he saw his daughter dressed like a homeless person, performing for money on the street, he couldn't contain his rage. He rushed to drag her home, but her blonde boyfriend, Aaron, blocked his way and arrogantly said, "I'm with her, and you're going to die." Simon's blood pressure soared. He lost control and punched Aaron hard in the face. Coincidentally, an influencer was filming in the park and recorded the entire incident, uploading it to her channel. The clip quickly went viral online. Netizens didn't know the full story. They only saw a well-dressed man, seemingly from the elite, beating up a homeless person, so they unanimously condemned Simon as a cruel father. Even his mother was subjected to terrible insults. He was arrested and taken to the police station. Fortunately, he used his money to hire a very famous lawyer. Upon arriving at the station, this lawyer used his sharp wit to turn the incident into legitimate self-defense and helped him get acquitted. Returning home, he was still distraught. He was determined to find his daughter. That encounter only strengthened his belief that he couldn't let his daughter continue down that path. In this country, cases of teenagers running away from home and disappearing are not uncommon. Because the police respect human rights, they usually don't actively search for them. Children from poor families who run away often end up wandering the streets and becoming addicted. Their parents, even if they wanted to, are often unable to do so, as most poor families can barely provide for themselves. But wealthy families have more options. They often hire private detectives to track down their children. At the same time, another wealthy family faced a similar situation when their son disappeared without a trace. Sebastian called Detective Elena and asked for her help in finding his son, Henry. Meanwhile, Simon was desperate to find his daughter. He even regretted not beating Aaron more severely. His youngest daughter, Anya, a high school student, was being ridiculed by her friends because a video of her father had gone viral online, causing her immense shame. Simon's wife, Ingrid, also disapproved of his actions. She questioned why he went to look for his daughter without telling her beforehand. He claimed that he didn't tell her because he knew she would object. The next day, the police received news that Aaron had been murdered in his own room. His death was horrific. 3 of his fingers had been severed, a very typical gang-related revenge killing. A man like Aaron, addicted to drugs, involved in drug trafficking, and part of a gang, wouldn't evoke much sympathy from the police if he were killed. But since there was a murder, they still had to investigate the culprit. Inspector Isaac immediately focused his attention on Simon because everyone knew he had recently clashed with Aaron. When Simon heard about Aaron's murder, he was terrified. He tried to explain that he hadn't killed anyone, but the police clearly didn't believe him. This news plunged him into extreme anxiety. He feared that his daughter might also be caught in the gang cycle of hatred and her life would be in danger. Therefore, he was even more determined to find information about her. Meanwhile, Detective Elena also went to Sebastian's house to investigate the situation. He explained that he and his first wife had no children, so they adopted Henry. After his wife's death, Henry suffered a great shock. When he remarried a much younger woman, the conflict between Henry and his stepmother intensified, leading him to drug use. This wasn't the first time Henry had run away from home. On previous occasions, he hadn't said a word. This time, however, he deliberately texted to tell them not to look for him because he wanted to go out. This struck Sebastian as very unusual. Before Elena arrived, she had located Henry's phone and discovered it had lost signal. In an era where young people rarely drop their phones, this meant he was very likely murdered. At the same time, a young couple was taking advantage of the darkness to commit a frenzied crime. That evening, Simon calmly talked with his wife and they agreed to search for Paige together. Since Aaron was dead and her whereabouts were unknown, they decided to go to the apartment where he was killed to look for clues. But upon reaching the door, they encountered a major obstacle. Because the apartment was sealed off, the door was locked. A man of the elite class like Simon had no idea how to unlock it, so he could only clumsily kick the door. This caused a commotion and attracted the attention of the neighbors in this unstable slum. Fortunately, the neighbor turned out to be a good man. Cornelius said he knew Paige. He considered her a good child. Their relationship could be considered friendship, so he was willing to help. Paige had previously given him a key because she was afraid of losing it. Thanks to that, he opened the door and let them into the apartment. He also recounted that 2 days before Aaron's death, he had seen Paige, covered in injuries, rushing out of the house. It seemed her addiction had flared up and she was looking for the drug dealer, Aaron's superior. He said Aaron was currently in the basement of the building next door. Cornelius had witnessed Paige's increasingly depraved behavior firsthand and believed it was all Aaron's fault. She had even considered killing him, but ultimately didn't. Simon hastily asked who killed Aaron, but the man just shook his head, saying he didn't know. He also didn't know where Paige had gone. He hadn't seen her since then. To continue their search for clues, Simon and his wife went down to the basement of the adjacent building and encountered the drug lord Rocco. They were determined to find out the whereabouts of their daughter. He was known for his quick and reckless actions. Simon was completely unprepared for the fact that at that very moment, Rocco's henchmen suddenly raised their guns and pointed them directly at them. In an instant, gunshots rang out and everything descended into chaos. After receiving the report, the police sealed off Rocco's entire basement, making it the crime scene. Rocco, however, disappeared without a trace that night. Besides Simon and his wife, everyone involved in the case remained silent. The rule of the underworld was absolute secrecy. No one wanted to say too much to the police. This inadvertently gave the police more room for speculation. Inspector Isaac began to suspect that after Simon killed Aaron, he went to Rocco. It was possible that because there were witnesses there, Rocco fired first to protect himself. When a police officer takes a preconceived notion and assumes Simon is guilty, all of his actions are interpreted as criminal. At this point, he is completely unable to deal with the police, as his wife has been rushed to the hospital after the accident. However, Isaac deliberately chose the moment when Simon was weakest to take his statement and then handcuff him and take him to the police station. Meanwhile, Elena continues to trace Henry's connections and discovers that before his disappearance, he had been in contact with a female university student. This girl is none other than Paige. Upon hearing this name, Sebastian recalls that he had previously overheard Henry calling her. Sebastian's wife had asked Henry if he was in a relationship, and he immediately became angry. From that reaction, Elena deduces that this girl is extremely important to Henry and that her existence is something he doesn't want to share with anyone else. At this time, Isaac deliberately arranges for Simon to confront Luther directly, who was injured. Isaac wanted Luther to realize that Simon was the one who shot him, but neither of them reacted the way Isaac hoped. Luther was reluctant to speak much. Simon, upon seeing Luther, became extremely agitated, repeatedly shouting about where his daughter was. However, this hospital visit led Isaac to focus on a new suspect. He discovered that a colleague of Ingrid's was showing unusually high interest in her. Ingrid was a nurse, and this colleague was a doctor. The doctor frequently appeared in Ingrid's ward during working hours. They even acted like family. Therefore, Isaac decided to start his investigation with this suspicious doctor to find a breakthrough. At the same time, Elena continued her investigation and discovered that Paige had recently emailed Henry. While everything was in such turmoil, Simon's son, Sam, was still unaware that his mother had been injured. He put his sister's guitar up for sale on a second-hand platform, hoping to find a buyer. Someone contacted him quickly. The buyer seemed knowledgeable about music and very interested in the guitar. Sam thought he'd found a decent buyer. Unexpectedly, after the transaction was complete, the buyer smashed the guitar against a post. For some people, destroying something someone else cherishes gives them a sense of conquest and destructive pleasure. Although Ingrid was still unconscious, Simon didn't give up searching for their daughter, so he sought out Cornelius, who had helped them on the night of the shooting. Simon knew that Cornelius was the one who had shot Luther that night. Cornelius had saved Simon's life, so he didn't tell the police that he'd seen Cornelius shoot. Knowing Simon still wanted to find Rocco to ask about Paige's whereabouts, Cornelius proactively led him to Rocco's house. Rocco had fled back to his hometown, but they tracked him down. Naturally, he was extremely annoyed. However, he didn't want to cause trouble at his mother's house. To prevent Simon from continuing to pester him, this time he obediently answered the questions. He admitted that Paige had indeed come to him that day to buy drugs, but she didn't have any money, so he sent her away. He hadn't seen her since. The police uncovered a new clue by reviewing the hospital's surveillance cameras. They discovered that on the night Aaron was murdered, Ingrid should have been on duty at the hospital throughout her shift, but she had left the hospital for a period of time. To find Paige, Simon had to ask Cornelius to offer a reward in the slum. Anyone who could provide information about Paige's whereabouts would receive £50,000. The people in the slum would certainly risk their lives searching for her for this money. Then Cornelius received a call reporting that someone had broken into Aaron's residence. Simon immediately immediately rushed there and found a strange woman. This woman was none other than Alina. While tracking down the missing Henry, Alina investigated Paige. Meanwhile, the young couple involved in the crime pulled out a stack of photos. Among the people in the photos were several victims they had murdered. Even more horrifying was a picture of Aaron and Paige together. This raised questions about whether Aaron was killed by this couple and whether Paige was still alive. After their meeting, Simon remained confused. Alina then frankly explained her purpose. She had traced Paige's emails to this apartment. Paige had sent Henry the address of this apartment, seemingly inviting him over. However, she quickly changed her mind and asked him not to come. Strangely, the IP address of that email could be traced back to another university, the same university Sam was attending. As soon as Simon heard the name of the school, he immediately realized that his son had most likely met his daughter recently. Alina went on to explain that the email was sent sometime before Paige disappeared. This completely stunned Simon. While he was searching everywhere for Paige, he had no idea that Sam had met her. This made Alina laugh. Perhaps Simon's family wasn't as happy as it seemed on the surface. At Alina's sarcasm, Simon couldn't help but ask if she was married. He vaguely felt she was like a single woman who had become completely disillusioned with her family. She said she was married. But marriage doesn't mean understanding the man you live with every day. This statement seemed to suggest she had also experienced a painful past. However, Simon and Alina quickly reached an initial agreement that she would help him track down Paige, as this matter was directly related to Henry. Simon took Alina back to Ingrid's hospital room and asked Sam if he had ever met Paige's sister. He admitted that her appearance about a week earlier had surprised him greatly. He said he hadn't intentionally hidden it from Simon, but only because she had asked him not to. During that time, she had stayed in his dorm. At first, he thought letting his sister stay was no problem, but unexpectedly, after a week, she stole his and other people's belongings from the dorm and ran away. She left him with a huge mess, forcing him to sell her guitar. Hearing this, Simon couldn't control his anger towards Sam, but that only made him feel more hurt. Perhaps it was because of Simon's attitude that his children didn't want to open up to him. After calming down, he apologized to Sam and then turned to discuss the next steps with Alina. She said her next goal was a tattoo shop. After Henry ran away from home, she found a tattoo shop flyer in his room. The shop was far from where he lived. He didn't seem interested in getting a tattoo, yet he kept the flyer. This suggests the tattoo shop might have some connection to him. Meanwhile, the young couple committing the crime seemed to have already targeted their next victim. The woman clearly holds the dominant role, while the man appears submissive. Their conversations reveal they've known each other since childhood, having moved through several different adoptive families. This makes the man see the woman as the only important person in his life. After obtaining the surveillance footage, Isaac believes he has crucial evidence, so he approaches Ingrid's colleague Jay to ask why Aaron left the hospital the night he was murdered. Jay's explanation was quite reasonable. It was no surprise. For medical staff who regularly worked night shifts and overtime, hunger was commonplace. The hospital had a weekly tradition of a fixed evening called cereal night. Isaac investigated and discovered that this so-called cereal night did indeed exist. He was extremely disappointed that he hadn't gathered any useful clues, but he didn't give up and dragged a female colleague to the cereal shop. The shopkeeper confirmed that Ingrid was a regular customer and that she had indeed come to buy cereal at midnight that night. Under Isaac's persistent questioning, the shopkeeper finally remembered that Ingrid hadn't actually brought cereal that night. She had left through the back door. This gave Isaac another breakthrough. Could she have used that time to go to Aaron's apartment and murder him? Was her entire behavior just a fabrication of an alibi? Simon had every motive to harm Aaron, and Ingrid certainly did too. Aaron had lured Paige away from home. He not only treated her poorly, but also left her to wander aimlessly, become addicted to drugs, and even physically abused her. At Aaron's funeral, Simon appeared to observe the reactions of those present and to see if Paige would show up. Aaron's biological father clearly disapproved of Simon's presence, but Aaron's stepmother seemed more submissive. This gave Simon a sense of vulnerability. Meanwhile, Elena arrived at the tattoo parlor and discovered it had become the scene of a murder. The owner and an employee had been shot dead by an unknown assailant. The police suspected it was a robbery that led to an accidental shooting, but Elena immediately asserted that this speculation was wrong and that the investigation was completely off track. Her attitude greatly annoyed the police. At that moment, she called the officer's superior and asked them to speak with her boss. Because she wasn't just an ordinary private investigator, she had worked within the system for many years and had a very wide network of connections. Under pressure from her superior, the officer was forced to allow Elena to accompany them to the scene to investigate. Based on the remaining evidence, she concluded that this was the work of professional assassins. They killed the boss first. Then, when discovered by the employees, they killed the boss as well. Meanwhile, Simon relentlessly pursued Aaron's stepmother. Finally, he obtained a crucial clue. She said that Aaron's father had told her that Aaron was the result of a fleeting affair when he went to Italy. Aaron's biological mother was Italian and had died in a car accident at a very young age. However, during a family trip abroad, she discovered that her husband had no passport, meaning he had never been overseas. From then on, Aaron's true identity became a mystery. When Elena confirmed that the tattoo shop owner had been murdered, she contacted his partner and showed him the tattoo shop advertisement with the phone number on it. Elena immediately recognized it as her husband's number, but she had never heard her husband mention Henry or Paige. After Simon learned of the situation, he confronted Aaron's father. Simon was furious and felt Aaron's father owed him an explanation, believing Aaron had ruined his daughter. However, Aaron's father revealed a shocking truth. Aaron hadn't initiated contact with Paige. She had repeatedly visited the farm. Simon was stunned, completely unprepared for the fact that his own daughter had been the one to do it. As Simon walked past the dilapidated trailer where Aaron used to live, he couldn't resist going inside. A strange feeling of tension welled up inside him. He feared his daughter might be there, yet he also feared she had actually been there. Fortunately, he didn't find his daughter in the trailer. He only found one of her coats. This proved she had indeed returned to the place. Simon's heart ached, and he began to suspect that something might have happened at the university that had changed his daughter. Meanwhile, the police, after reviewing surveillance footage, discovered that after Ingrid left the cereal shop, she went into a dark alley, followed by a man. To uncover the truth, Simon returned to Paige's university and confronted her roommate. The girl was extremely flustered upon seeing him, but after his persistence, she finally admitted that Paige had been the one to approach Aaron. Paige even borrowed her car to go meet him. From that moment on, things seemed to start to change, but she didn't know exactly what happened. She only said that the addiction and the moral decay had turned Paige into someone unrecognizable. But the truth was, Paige had changed even before her drug addiction. She met Aaron before she started using drugs. This made things much worse than Simon initially thought, because if she wasn't addicted to drugs and her mind was still clear, why would she have been interested in someone like Aaron in the first place? At this point, Paige's roommate mentioned that she had talked about her family having problems. That statement plunged Simon into deep self-reproach. He began to reflect on whether he had been too strict with Paige. Was it because he hadn't given his daughter enough paternal attention that she sought out Aaron and fell into vice? Meanwhile, the young couple, driven by a frenzy of crime, knock on the door of an elderly woman who had been their adoptive mother when they were children. The old woman says they were once her two most beloved children. After Isaac's investigation, he discovers that the man following Ingrid is Jay. The police summon Jay to the station. He admits that he was indeed with Ingrid that night. Initially, he didn't say anything because he feared misunderstanding, but now he is forced to admit that Ingrid was with him that night, at his own house. This gives Ingrid a complete alibi and leaves her no time to commit the crime. However, it also means that Simon may have been betrayed by his wife. To clarify what Paige went through, Simon asks Sam to return home and help him retrieve his daughter's diary. Sam discovers many PvP symbols in Paige's diary, along with mentions of a genealogical group. While Simon was racking his brain trying to figure out what PvP meant, they unexpectedly ran into another of Paige's roommates. She was an enthusiastic girl who explained that PvP was the initials of a biology professor at the school. Paige had been very close to this professor and had even participated in a genealogy group led by him. Simon went to the professor's office, intending to meet him in person, only to find out the professor had taken a long leave of absence. Just then, a male student approached Simon from behind and told him rumors about the professor. He said the professor was very good and asked if Simon thought Paige had eloped with Beak. Simon's head immediately ached, as if it were about to explode. He realized that his daughter might have been manipulated or exploited by Beak, leading her to this point. His anger almost made him want to kill Beak. When Elena learned of Simon's investigation, she immediately advised him not to act rashly. At the same time, she said that her side had also uncovered some clues. The tattoo shop owner was also an adopted child. Therefore, she began to suspect that Henry's disappearance and the tattoo shop owner's murder were very likely committed by the same group, as both shared the same background of being adopted children. Elena returned to Sebastian to inquire about Henry's adoption process and confirmed that Henry and the tattoo shop owner came from the same adoption agency. After confirming this, Elena arranged to meet Simon again at a restaurant. Her gaze constantly followed the female owner, making Simon curious. She openly revealed that her husband had passed away but had left her a great gift, his secret illegitimate daughter. Simon immediately felt immense sympathy for her, but very quickly he lost the ability to empathize with her, because Isaac came to his house and announced that his wife had had an affair with her colleague. Simon's mind completely exploded. During this time, his worldview crumbled countless times, especially when it came to his his daughter's participation in the genealogy group, he began to suspect that Paige's silence was because he wasn't her biological father. He wondered if her claims of family problems stemmed from discovering her mother's infidelity. He even began to doubt whether he was Paige's biological father. Meanwhile, Elena also got into serious trouble because she constantly stalked the restaurant owner and even broke into her house, leading to her arrest by the police. In another development, the young couple who committed the crime finally couldn't hold back and confronted the old woman who had been their adoptive mother when they were children. They questioned why she had mistreated them years ago, using an iron to torture them. Unexpectedly, the old woman remained cold and showed no remorse for her actions. Their rage completely erupted. The man pulled the trigger and shot the old woman dead on the spot. Simon, unable to control himself, rushed to the hospital. Facing his comatose wife, he could only sit by her bedside and ask the question he longed to ask most. Was Paige his daughter? This question was destined to remain unanswered. But the next moment, his wife's wounds suddenly burst open, and she was immediately rushed to the emergency room. In reality, this young couple had a far from simple background. The girl, named Dee, belonged to an extremely wealthy cult with a vast estate. Yet the members dressed very simply. She received a mission from her superiors to spread the radiant truth of God. The boy, named Oz, because he loved her, completely obeyed and submitted to her. Throughout their journey, she continuously preached, intending to lure him into joining the cult. But he didn't believe her and thought she had been brainwashed. The two murderers were constantly arguing fiercely about religious matters. Meanwhile, Elena, recently released from the police station, encountered her mother-in-law, Maria, who was also her technical partner and always supported her from behind the scenes. Elena was furious because she found a photo of Maria in her husband's daughter's house. This proved that Maria had known about the child's existence for a long time but had helped her son conceal the truth. Elena angrily said that Maria should have told her. Maria tried to explain that she only learned about it after her son's death, but Elena didn't believe her weak excuse. After the argument, Elena immediately went to see Simon and expressed her suspicion that the missing and murdered people were all connected through the same website that searches for paternity. They were all adopted children, and that was likely the reason they were targeted. However, she still didn't understand how this was related to Paige. Paige was Simon's biological daughter. After that explanation, Simon painfully told Elena that even he wasn't sure if Paige was his daughter anymore because his wife had been having an affair for a long time. Furthermore, he had investigated and found that Aaron was very likely also an adopted child. On the police side, through bullet trajectory analysis, they determined that the person who shot and wounded Luther was not Simon but Cornelius. Coincidentally, Isaac had an old relationship with this man. They were neighbors years ago. Isaac knew Cornelius was a good person, so he confronted him. Cornelius admitted his actions and said that at the time he only wanted to save Simon and his wife because they were both good people and didn't deserve to die unjustly. This answer left Isaac utterly helpless. In principle, he should have immediately arrested Cornelius, but he wanted to cover for him. After much hesitation, Isaac did not directly arrest Cornelius, but only left a warning, instructing him not to continue using violence or firearms. Meanwhile, Elena went directly to the orphanage where she had arranged for the children's adoption years ago. She wanted to inquire about the children's situation. Unexpectedly, the person in charge chased her out. While sitting down, she secretly left a handset in the person's fruit tray. This allowed her to overhear a call the person made to a mysterious individual immediately after she left. Based on the key press sounds, Elena obtained the phone number and immediately called the other end. The person who answered was a woman currently working as a real estate project manager. Elena immediately went to the woman's shop and met her in person. However, the woman refused to say much, only claiming that she had saved the boys years ago. When Elena pressed her for answers, the woman panicked and ran away. Her colleagues even thought Elena was a bad person, so he intervened to stop her. Having lost track of her, Elena resorted to threatening the woman's colleague to extract information about her whereabouts. Elena learned that the woman was a lesbian and was likely hiding at her girlfriend's house. Elena asked Maria to help her find the address of the woman's girlfriend. Meanwhile, Dee returned to the cult's base with Ash. The cult leader received them and gave them more names to be eliminated. But Ash began to realize something was wrong. His helping her kill wasn't simply for money, but because he wanted to be with her, because he loved her and wanted to protect her. But if she was completely controlled by the cult, everything he did seemed meaningless. To be on the safe side, Simon had his children's hair samples tested for DNA to confirm if they were truly his biological children. But until the results came back, he couldn't calm down. That evening, he met Jay again. Simon's anger flared up even more. He repeatedly questioned whether Jay had a relationship with his wife, but Jay only left a cryptic remark that Simon still didn't know much about Ingrid. Simon became even more confused. During the investigation of similar cases, the police discovered uncovered new clues. A man around Aaron's age had died. Henry, who had gone missing, also died mysteriously recently. Initially, this man's death was concluded to be suicide, but after a thorough examination of the crime scene, the police found evidence sufficient to overturn that conclusion. There was a bullet hole in the wall. Normally, no one would shoot themselves in the wall before committing suicide. Even less likely would someone already dead fire another shot. This behavior resembled the methods of a professional killer. After killing someone, they would put a gun in the victim's hand and pull the trigger to create a gunpowder reaction, disguising it as a suicidal act. Upon hearing this, Elena became even more certain of her suspicions. Meanwhile, as Ash was leaving school, he found a note in his car telling him not to trust DD, that it was all a lie. This made him increasingly uneasy. He asked her why she had to kill those people, but she remained silent. Isaac interrogated Luther, hoping for a breakthrough. Unexpectedly, Luther's attitude became extremely strange under his questioning. Luther clearly showed himself to be someone willing to eliminate anything that threatened him to avoid further trouble. At this point, Elena confirmed that the murdered people had all registered on the same website to find relatives. Not only were they adopted children, but also half-siblings. Among them was Aaron. Now, all they needed to do was find the person in charge who arranged for these children to be adopted, and all the mysteries would be solved. Meanwhile, Sam and Anya registered a new social media account under the name Paige and sent a follow request to Beak. Surprisingly, he actually accepted. Thanks to this, they were able to see his hidden activities and discovered that he was currently teaching at another university. Simon immediately went to this school and met Beak. From there, Simon learned a truth completely different from what he had imagined. Beak had never been romantically involved with a student. On the contrary, it was Paige's roommate, Katie, who had been constantly harassing him. Therefore, he was forced to report it to the school. Although the report came in time, it still caused a huge uproar. No one believed that a seemingly innocent girl like Katie would actively harass Beak. People spread rumors that he was a pervert. The rumors spread like wildfire, making it impossible for him to continue teaching at that school, and he had to transfer elsewhere. The relationship between him and Paige was purely that of teacher and student. She had wanted to study medicine and become a doctor like her mother. During that time, she often came to him for help with pre-medical courses. She studied very hard, and he wholeheartedly helped her pursue her dream. But he vaguely sensed that her efforts seemed to be an escape from something. He felt there was trouble in her family, but he didn't know what it was. He only saw that she wasn't well, so he didn't ask too many questions and gave her enough space. What puzzled Simon even more was why Paige, who was doing so well in her studies, would suddenly give up her dream of becoming a doctor. When this was mentioned, Beak looked extremely distressed, saying that one day Paige came to him in a state of extreme distress. Only then did he learn that the night before, she had attended a party and drunk something, then lost consciousness. When she woke up the next morning, she found herself and another boy lying naked in the same bed. Simon, a large man, couldn't help but have tears welling up in his eyes at that moment. Simon asked Beak why such a serious matter hadn't been reported to the police. He told Simon that Paige herself didn't want to report it at the time, but he still had a duty to report it to the school. However, after he reported it to the school, she no longer trusted him. Simon angrily argued that the school knew about such a serious matter but didn't inform the parents. Beak could only helplessly explain that the school had called Paige to the office to clarify the matter, but then she completely denied that it had ever happened. Therefore, they couldn't inform the parents. Moreover, she was an adult at the time, so the school had to respect her personal wishes and privacy. Simon was extremely indignant. He asked Beak if he knew who had raped Paige. Beak said that not long after, something very strange happened. He claimed that the male student who raped Paige was severely beaten in the gym. His name was Doug. When Simon saw Doug's picture, he was utterly stunned. Doug was the young man who had stood outside Beak's office, proactively striking up a conversation and offering help. After Doug's attack, Paige's condition improved unusually. She was no longer the same, but much more cheerful. Beak suspected that Paige might have started using drugs. After the lecture, he saw her with another young man. He suspected that this person might be the one who attacked Doug. Simon showed Beak a photo of Aaron for confirmation. He nodded. At this point, all the pieces finally came together. It turned out that the reason Paige loved Aaron was because he was willing to help her punish the man who raped her. In the eyes of others, Aaron was just a thug, but in Paige's eyes, he was a hero. From then on, this obedient girl embarked on a path of no return. Meanwhile, Elena finally found a clue from a neighbor of the victim. She knew that this person seemed to have witnessed the murder firsthand. It was a young couple, but besides confirming they were a couple, there were no other clues. Elena could only ask Maria to check the surveillance camera footage for traces of the two murderers. Taking this opportunity, Maria wanted to explain to Elena that before marrying her, her husband had a female friend. Their relationship was purely platonic. However, that woman had been single for many years and desperately wanted a child. So, her husband helped her. Hearing this, Alina became even angrier. It was just artificial insemination, and there was absolutely no physical relationship. Elena's husband should have told her this. But after learning that Alina couldn't get pregnant and have children, her spirits plummeted. He didn't want to upset her further. After hearing this, Alina still had doubts, but she felt much relieved and no longer hated her husband as much as before. Very soon after, she received another piece of good news. An employee of the adoption agency finally agreed to meet her, but this time, the caller was the employee's girlfriend. She said he had called her and arranged to meet in the parking lot. She would take Elena to meet him. Elena happily went to the meeting place. Sure enough, she met a girl, but that girl wasn't the employee's girlfriend. It was Dee. Dee tricked Elena into leaving her gun and phone in the car. Then, she led Elena into a room. Only then did Elena realize that another male gunman was already lying in ambush in the room. She immediately realized the imminent danger, but it was too late. In fact, from the beginning, a pair of eyes had been silently observing everything in the shadows. It was an old nun from the sect. She had tried to warn a young man on the list to leave immediately, saying that he was in danger. She couldn't reveal how she knew, but 2 people had been sent to kill him. However, this warning was dismissed as the madness of a deranged person. The young man's recklessness cost him his life. The nun who left the warning note for Ash was also this nun. Simon, who had been living in constant anxiety for the past few days, finally received the results of the paternity test. The result was positive in a good way. Paige was indeed his biological daughter. Finally, he felt a weight lifted from his heart. Moreover, what made him even happier was that not only Paige, but all 3 children were his biological children. As soon as he received this news, Simon immediately shared it with Elena, but he had no idea that she had been murdered by Dee. Her phone had also fallen into Dee's hands. At this time, Simon was still trying to figure out why Paige was his daughter, and why she knew Aaron, and why Aaron helped Paige beat Doug. As time passed, Maria, who contacted Elena most often, noticed something unusual when she stopped answering her phone. After Maria's investigation revealed something amiss, she immediately reported it to the police. Isaac investigated, but without success. It was only then that he took over Elena's investigation and gained a broader understanding of the situation. To find the reason for her disappearance, they contacted Sebastian, her employer. Sebastian reported significant progress, stating that he had received a letter the previous day from a woman named Victoria. This woman suggested she wanted to meet Henry. Isaac immediately led his colleagues to the meeting place to see who this woman was. Upon meeting the police, the woman appeared utterly astonished and slowly revealed the whole truth. It turned out that years prior, she had been bewitched by a cult, joined their sect, and given birth to a child for the cult leader. This man frequently abused many women after she gave birth. Members of the church told her the child was dead. She was devastated, but what made her even more desperate was that not long after, the cult leader grew tired of her and abandoned her. She lived a life of humiliation within the church. She was forced to flee. She thought she would never see her deceased son again. That was until Henry found her through a website that helped locate relatives and told her he was her son. At first, she couldn't believe it. Only then did she realize that the child hadn't died at all, but had been given to an adoption agency by the church. Because of that letter, Ash remained distraught, constantly questioning Dee. Reluctantly, Dee had to tell her everything. It turned out that those on the assassination list were all the sons of the church leader. The leader was suffering from cancer and didn't have long to live. The church was about to be taken over by his 2 sons, but the church leader had more than just those 2 sons. To make the followers accept this succession system, the leader had fabricated a very sophisticated theory to portray himself and his 2 sons as heirs. But if the church members knew that he had more than just these 2 children, the church's foundational beliefs would surely be shaken. Worse still, the church had initially stipulated that only males had the right to inherit. That is, any child of the church leader had the right to inherit the church. His daughters, however, had no right to inheritance. Therefore, daughters could be kept within the church to continue as slaves, while sons were forced to leave to avoid internal conflict. The most dangerous thing was that the children who were adopted outside seemed to have found each other. They were about to uncover the truth. If they returned, it would be a fatal blow to the church. To ensure a smooth succession, the church needed Dee to hire someone to kill each of the church leader's sons. It felt exactly like the insane scenario of some wealthy man having hundreds of sons and then having to clean up the mess to secure his throne. Dee understood everything, but she was only pretending. She didn't believe in this religion at all. She believed that the leaders thought they could exploit her, but they couldn't. She was the one exploiting them to get what she deserved. She wanted to make a large sum of money. After completing this, she and Ash would retreat to the seaside, open a small restaurant, and fulfill their childhood childhood dreams. But currently, there were still 2 people on their list. The first was Aaron, and the second was Simon. Simon was certainly not the cult leader's son, but because Simon had investigated so much, they were forced to take action against him. At this time, Simon returned to the hospital to visit Ingrid. He couldn't control himself and told Ingrid's sister everything that had happened to Paige. Unexpectedly, she reacted very unnaturally. Only then did Simon realize that he was the only one in the house who didn't know everything Paige had gone through. Everyone was hiding it from him. This made him furious. Just then, Cornelius reported that Rocco wanted to speak with Simon. Since Luther had been released on bail, he might be able to provide clues about Paige's whereabouts. Simon immediately took the £50,000 reward and went to Rocco's location. Unexpectedly, he arrived just as Dee and Ash were on their way to carry out a mission. The two had broken into Aaron's house, but found he wasn't home. While they were confused about where to look, Simon suddenly appeared. Simon was also one of their targets, so they immediately followed him. Rocco told Simon that Luther didn't want to see him, but Rocco had heard from someone else that Paige had boarded a bus to another city. Simon should consider if she knew anyone there. Simon tried to think. Rocco reminded him to think carefully. At that moment, gunshots suddenly rang out. Dee and Ash fired at the 3 of them, but none of the bullets hit Simon. Conversely, Rocco was shot dead and Cornelius was wounded. During the melee, Ash was also shot dead. Simon managed to help Cornelius escape, but they hadn't gotten far when Dee caught up and shot them. The situation was extremely dangerous when a nun suddenly appeared behind Dee, seemingly out of nowhere, and pushed her from a height, causing her to fall. After so many events, the police finally acted. They sealed off the religious sect, but the leader had disappeared. Isaac thought the leader had escaped earlier, but as he prepared to leave, he discovered a secret door. He cautiously pushed it open and indeed found the leader in a locked room. However, the old man held a poison pill and threatened to end everything. He already had cancer and didn't have long to live, so he had no regrets about his life. Having lived his whole life in luxury, he refused to suffer humiliation even in death. Isaac stalled for time and distracted them. Before the old man could react, Isaac pushed him forcefully against the wall and successfully subdued him. Compared to letting the old man die easily and giving the cult a reason to continue its activities, bringing him to court, stripping him of all his glory, and letting the law judge him would clearly have a stronger deterrent effect. The police searched the entire cult, but still couldn't find Paige. Afterwards, Isaac apologized to Simon and admitted that if it had hurt Simon, he was wrong. Thanks to timely treatment, Simon's life was saved. But when Isaac asked who saved him, he always said that he couldn't see clearly and had fainted. There was very bad news. Elena could almost certainly be murdered by Dee because the camera recorded her meeting Dee and then she never left the room again. After that, Dee drove away in her car. The police have now concluded that the 2 assassins killed Aaron, but Simon knows that's not the truth because those 2 were clearly visiting Aaron's apartment for the first time. The police believed they had returned to the crime scene, but Simon believed they simply hadn't seen the news and didn't know Aaron was dead, so they still went to carry out their mission. Later, the nun who had saved Simon visited him in the hospital and told him her story. It turned out that when she was young, she had also given birth to a son for the religious leader, and that child was one of the 2 chosen by the leader to be his successor. At first, the nun was very happy, but not long after, she became pregnant again and gave birth to another child. This time, the church told her that the baby had died, but in reality, they transferred the child to an adoption agency. Because of the nun's high position in the church, she knew the inside story. When the church began purging the religious leader's sons who were scattered outside, she realized her own son was also in danger, so she had been secretly helping from the shadows all this time. Even though the church has now been officially purged by the government, the nun has lived more than half her life within that sect and religion, so she is almost unable to completely escape. She was preparing to flee with the remaining remnants to re-establish the church, but soon after, a miracle happened. Paige voluntarily returned home. It turned out she had seen news of her mother's injury and coma and wanted to visit her. During this time, she was not in any danger, but was in a rehabilitation center to quit drugs. Her health had now recovered. Simon had recovered his health and was extremely angry. He asked her why she hadn't contacted her family if she had gone to rehabilitation, and it was clearly a positive change. She hadn't told him, causing him to worry to the point of putting himself in danger. Paige, with a remorseful expression, said that she was afraid of disappointing him, so she didn't dare contact her family. There had been a time when she wanted to get her life back on track, so she secretly contacted her mother. It was her mother who had brought her to this rehabilitation center, because when she was young, her mother had also undergone rehabilitation there. Simon was shocked once again. He had no idea his wife was still secretly in contact with their daughter. He also had no idea she had been a drug addict when she was younger. Paige's next words only deepened his suspicions. She said that just as things were starting to improve at the rehabilitation center, Aaron showed up. He secretly injected her with drugs and brought her back home. Simon pressed him for the truth about who had killed Aaron. Paige frankly admitted that she had killed him. He had discovered his half-siblings. They had planned to meet and acknowledge each other. But at the last minute, Aaron hesitated because he had become extremely jealous of them living better lives than him. Aaron lost control of his emotions and even physically assaulted Paige. She couldn't bear the beatings. At the same time, she realized how twisted Aaron's jealousy had become. He was someone who wanted to drag everyone around him down into the mud with him. If she wanted her life back to normal, she absolutely had to get rid of him. But Simon knew that wasn't the truth. He told his daughter that no matter what happened, he would protect her and that she could tell him the truth. Finally, she revealed the truth. That night, after being beaten, she went home crying to her mother. It was just a complaint, but she didn't expect to find Aaron dead the next day when she returned to the apartment. Ingrid had resorted to unscrupulous methods to protect her daughter. At this moment, her mother regained consciousness after recovering her health for some time. Simon decided to talk directly to Ingrid, and she confessed everything. She had planned the murder in advance, proactively discussing it with Jay to create an alibi and quietly kill Aaron. She didn't tell Simon because if the truth came out and she was caught, at least he would still be there to take care of the children. This also explains why Luther panicked and pulled the trigger the moment he saw Ingrid. Because he witnessed her murder that night and thought she had returned to kill the witness, he acted first. However, Simon always felt something was wrong. One day, he suddenly realized something was amiss when he found old photos of his wife. She had told him she had worked as a model and lived abroad for a while. But upon closer inspection, he noticed his wife was wearing the attire of a cult. All the clues immediately came together. Simon then contacted Doug, the man who had raped his daughter. Doug said that when Aaron attacked him, Aaron kept shouting, "No one is allowed to hurt my sister." At this point, Simon understood that Aaron was not just a simple blonde con artist. He recalled the detail that Aaron's apartment had 2 beds, something illogical for young couples. When Simon confronted Paige, she admitted that she had discovered a half-brother through a website, and that brother was Aaron. After learning about this, she became mentally distraught, which is why she devoted all her attention to studying medicine. Unexpectedly, tragedy struck. Aaron appeared to help her, but then dragged her into drug addiction. She always felt he was protecting her. It wasn't until he prevented her from quitting and started beating her that she realized how twisted his psyche was. Aaron had been abused by his adoptive father since childhood, so he couldn't bear the thought of his half-sister living better than him. He wanted to possess Paige so she would never leave him, and also wanted to punish the mother who abandoned him. Simon was stunned when he realized his wife was completely unaware that Aaron was her biological son and had killed him. He couldn't imagine how devastated she would be if she knew the truth. Finally, Simon and Paige agreed to bury this truth forever. The film ends here. See you in the next videos.